Welcome back to another week of Centenarian Club, everybody. We are blessed to have Dr. Alyssa Kirby Horowitz in the house today. So she's going to be talking about how our emotions have feelings too. If you remember last year, or sorry, yeah, last April, Alyssa was here to present, and we talked about that organ cycle and how they related to different emotions in Chinese medicine. So this is going to be really a Chinese medicine perspective on organs and how they relate to your emotions and how your emotions may give you an indicator or a cue as to your internal state and your your organ health. So Dr. Alyssa, you can take it away.
That was a beautiful introduction. Thank you. Yeah, last year, it's crazy. It's been a year. I came on and we spoke about the concept of intergenerational trauma, that it didn't start with you. And, one of the reasons why I love those types of talks is because they touch on the notion of spiritual health and our emotional health. We definitely live in a very physical world where we're focused on all the physical things we can do to relieve physical symptoms or see things physically. But we also have a spiritual and emotional health that needs tuning and nourishment. And what I love about Chinese medicine is that it encapsulates it all so beautifully in an ecosystem or an orchestra. So you start to see that everything is really deeply connected and that your health is more than just your physical symptoms. So today's talk is a prequel. So I'm going to be talking today and then also next Thursday. And today's class is going to build on next week's class. So today we're going to talk all about how your organs have feelings too. And we got to treat them with respect. The same way we treat ourselves, our organs are just a smaller version of us that each have feelings. And next week, based on this information, we're going to talk all about facial reading, how to read people's health based on their facial characteristics, based on so many other clues and symptoms that you can really read the health of someone. So I'm really excited about these two classes that I get to teach. So let's get right into it. So today we're going to just do a welcome overview, a little brief about me and the talk. We'll definitely dive into Chinese medicine philosophy, just like emotional health in Chinese medicine. We'll talk about the 5 main organs and their emotions. And of course, we're going to get into like practical tips, summaries, Q&As. We're going to have fun. This is all about chatting, learning, growing. So for those who don't know me, my name is Dr. Alyssa Kirby, and I'm a biochemist turned naturopathic doctor. It's always been my belief that we have the ability to heal far beyond what we've ever been led to believe. And that's why I love the Centenarian Club so much, because that is their philosophy, that you can heal, you can live a very long life, and you have all the tools you need to make that happen. And my jam is really just providing simple and empowering tips to help you on that journey. I believe it starts in the basics of our emotional health, our physical health, and our spiritual health. So, what that means is, how do you interact with the world around you? We're an ecosystem. How do you interact with your sleep, with your environment, with your relationships, with the relationship with yourself? I believe these have powerful ways to help us heal. And so let's dive right into Chinese medicine philosophy. Essentially, Chinese medicine, and TCM stands for traditional Chinese medicine. It's a philosophy of medicine that is based on the premise that all of life occurs within the circle of nature. And so, another way to look at it is that in our current system of medicine, right, our Western, everything is very reductionist and mechanical. So we tend to view things as all separate. You go to the cardiologist, you go to the hematologist, you go to the, GP, you go to your OBGYN. You're constantly going to these separate entities when really Chinese medicine says, hold on a second. We are a complex interweaving fabric and we interact with everything around us. The same way that a tree interacts with the soil and the air and the sun and the wind and the birds, us too. We are this complex ecosystem that interacts with so much around us and essentially mimics the natural world. And I'm sure we're all sort of aware of that and on that same page. And so this is a beautiful quote. Of course, I did not write who wrote it, but we can all Google it. What pattern connects the crab to the lobster and the orchids to the primrose and all 4 of them to me and me to you? And this quote is so beautiful because I think it encapsulates traditional Chinese medicine so perfectly. We're all connected. The same threads that allow for the seed to grow into a little seedling and then into a tree or a bush is that same energy that runs through our body that allows our blood vessels to pump and allows our lungs to breathe. It's that exact same energy. And so that pattern that exists in nature also exists in us. And that's what Chinese medicine really, really focuses on, is that we as humans are just a smaller version of the natural world. And so the laws that apply to the natural world, they also apply to us and our health. And so we'll dive in to the 5 organ systems. I also want to add that Chinese medicine is beautiful and simple and also complex at the same time. And so while I am presenting these ideas in a very general way, in a way that's very digestible, there's of course much more behind this. And I've added resources at the end that if any of you are curious about them, you can start diving into it to learn more of these philosophies. So simply put, think of your body as just a little world like nature. So in the same way that you have mountains and trees and valleys, each organs in our body is going to have different areas of mountains and valleys and trees, and they all require different environments and seasons and elements and nourishment. And so that same way that we have this vast, beautiful landscape around us, that vast, beautiful landscape lives inside us and is differentiated by our organ systems. And so each of your organs, they belong to an element, and they also belong to a season. So think of an element like wood, fire, metal, air, right? These are elements. Each organ belongs to that category. Just like trees and rivers and mountains in nature belong to an element. And just like the world around us, our body is constantly moving through these seasons and is changing and growing and adapting. So, I mean, I'll just sort of throw this out there, but what would be like an example of how our lifestyles are influenced by the seasons around us? What's like maybe perhaps a easy thing that we can think of in which our lifestyles are very easily influenced by seasons? Anybody have an idea?
Well, we see big mood changes in the winter for those of us in Canada. Mood can really go down in those winter seasons to the point where there's even a seasonal affective disorder, diagnosable thing from it.
Absolutely. That's a great example, right? So right there's an element, which is the sun, which is no longer there, and it's therefore affecting our emotional health and our physical health. On that note, a great example is just generally the notion that during winter months, we crave warmer foods. Our outside environment, which is cold and frigid and resting, naturally provides us with the instinct of, I need to warm up from the inside. In the same way that in summer months, when it's very hot outside, instinctively, your body is responding to the seasons and saying, hell no, I don't want a soup. I want ice cream. I want a cold lemonade. I need something with ice in it. So that's like a very, easy way to look at how influenced we are by the seasons from a lifestyle perspective. You could even say that our organs are also influenced by the seasons. And a cool way to look at that would be, think of when we transition from spring. Do we go from spring to winter? Spring to fall? Yes. Okay, I just lost the season for a second. But as we transition from seasons, that's a time of vulnerability. And what happens? Our organs are responding by also being vulnerable. We're more likely to get colds and flus. Our lungs are vulnerable. This transitional period that's happening in our outside world is also happening in our inside world. And we experience that by having increased colds and flus, increased allergies, right? That time of vulnerability. So that's just another example of how our outside environment, right? Nature, the seasons, all of that can affect not only our lifestyle, but our organs as well. And so I'm going to show you here. So these are the 5 main organs. We obviously have more organs than this, right? However, in Chinese medicine, they do categorize it by, let's say, the more main or prominent organ, and it has its corresponding organ. But we're just going to focus on these main ones for now. And so as you can see, each organ has an element, right? We spoke about that. The mountains have an element, the trees have an element, so do our organs have an element. So the element of the liver is wood. Think of wood in nature. Wood is needed as a cycle to help regrow, to help move things. Wood decays. And so I bring that up to you because Chinese medicine is quite philosophical. And so it doesn't end just at wood. Let's go deeper into it. What does wood really mean? How does it represent? What characteristics of wood, right? And that same thing goes for each of the other organs. The heart is the element of fire. Think of a fiery heart, somebody who has a lot of fire in their heart, right? We can all imagine, and I'm sure we've experienced someone like that. And same way, our spleen is governed by the element of earth, very grounded, very strong. And we'll get into more of these details, and things are going to start to piece together, which is exciting. The lung is governed by the element metal, right? Think of all the metals we naturally have in the outside world. We have golds, and we have silver, and we have manganese, and all these sort of minerals that are metal in their nature. And of course, kidneys are governed by water. So these are the elements in which these organs represent, in the same way that mountains might represent more water and valleys might represent more earth. They're just a characteristic that is tied to this organ. And of course, the emotion that goes with it.
I can just add quick, Allie.
Yes.
Just something like in Chinese medicine, we often just say spleen, and then in Western medicine, spleen, it has functions, but we don't really talk about it as much. But we're more referring to like digestive system. It's probably an easier way to think about it for people.
That's great. Yes.
It's not so much like the Western version of spleen. Same thing when we talk about the kidneys. Yeah, we're talking about the physiological kidneys in Western medicine, but also like the adrenal glands. So just so you know, the organs that they use and we use, sometimes it's a little bit of a difference. But just I think what's practical for people is to understand when we say spleen, just think about digestive system. It's probably the easiest way to think about it.
Thank you so much, Andrew. That's such a great point. I think also because our Western medical view is so reductionist, we look at things very absolute and polar. So it's like, this is the spleen and this is its function and that's all it is. Whereas in Chinese medicine, again, we're talking about this dynamic system. So yes, spleen is the digestive system, right? Kidney is going to also cover your urinary bladder and urinary functions. So there's more to a story to it than what meets the eye, than what we're used to. So thank you, Andrew. That's a great point. And so let's get kind of into the organs and their emotions. I'm really excited about this. So each organ is associated with a specific emotion. And what's so interesting is that, again, we live in this very conventional world where everything is quite physically focused. If we look at biohacking and we look at a lot of the health and wellness information that's out there, it's very physical focused. Take a supplement, do this physical thing. But what's so important too is that the health of our organs, it's not just reflected in our physical symptoms, right? The health of my liver is not just reflected in whether or not I have jaundice. The health of my liver is actually reflected in how I experience and express my emotions. Because this organ has an emotion attached to it, it wants to exercise that emotion in a balanced and harmonic way. But if I'm not expressing or experiencing that emotion in a balanced way, it's going to hurt that organ, right? It's going to hurt the function of that organ. And so what we see often in Chinese medicine is looking at individuals and observing which organs are in imbalances, and also taking emotional symptoms with just as much weight as physical symptoms, because you can actually get more information from the emotional symptoms than just the physical. And so we talk about this a lot. Like, I know that these headings are a bit grabby, like the angry drunk, right? Just because you have a liver and liver harbors anger doesn't mean we all have an angry liver. But what I'm trying to introduce is the notion that a lot of these sayings that we have in the English language, they hold more meaning than what we might have originally thought. And the whole term, the angry drunk, carries truth because in Chinese medicine, the liver harbors those emotions. The liver is responsible for those emotions of anger, frustration, and irritability. Another way I like to explain it is we spoke about how Chinese medicine is like a garden, right? Chinese medicine is nature. We are just an exemplary of this natural cycle. And so, in that same way that the sunshine and water help a tree grow, in our bodies, qi is the energy that's needed for things to move. And so, it's that reflection, the energy that the sun gives to the plants to allow it to grow, to do photosynthesis, is no different than the qi that's needed in our body to help move things and get things to grow and mature and recycle and do all the things we need to do. And why I bring that up is because every organ has a primary job. And it's the job of the liver to make sure that that qi, that energy, same way that sunshine is going to help that plant grow, that qi is needed to move smoothly throughout the body. So any disruption to that flow of qi, any disruption to that energy moving, well, we can imagine is going to give rise to emotional outbursts. And so what perhaps, like I'll just throw this out there, what perhaps would be examples of things that might hurt the flow of qi from the liver? Is there anything on the top of the head that anybody can think of that might hurt the qi or the smooth flow of that liver qi?
Like holding resentment or being angry.
Beautiful, Charles. Yes, yes. So that's one example. Let's call it emotional stress, right? Being angry and feeling anger is a healthy thing. But when we're holding on to anger, when we're having a hard time letting go of the situation and we're harboring anger, that's going to hurt our liver over time, right? Too much of that emotion is going to hurt it. We like balance, same like nature. We want harmony. Other things that might hurt the liver or bring rise to more anger and frustration is this term, the angry drunk. Have we ever noticed that some people might get more agitated or irritable or pent up when they drink alcohol? And that's literally because alcohol is a toxin to the liver. Alcohol is going to disrupt that flow of qi. Alcohol tells the qi, stop moving. I want to have a talk with you. And that qi does not want to stop moving. And so what happens when we stop that energy force? The emotion comes up, and that emotion is anger. And so that's where that term, the angry drunk, comes from, right? Alcohol is going to hurt our liver. Anything that's going to stop that smooth flow of qi can bring rise to more of these emotions. So let's think of stress, right? We live in a very stressful world. We're constantly holding on to stress, frustration, irritability, lack of planning or organizing. If we don't have big dreams for our lives, this can also hurt the flow of our organs. And so that's one way, alcohol, yes, that's definitely one way to look at it. The other thing with the liver, and this is where it gets really fun, is think of it like there's a characteristic. Like, you know, when you're describing someone who's a character, you can easily draw them out, right? You can say, oh, they're this type of person and they would definitely eat this type of thing and they would, you know, show up at this hour, right? It's the same thing for each of our organs. They are characters and they each have their own characteristics. And so let's elaborate a little bit on some of the characteristics of the liver. So we spoke about the emotion of anger. I'm sure we can all think of someone in our life whom perhaps predominantly holds that emotion. They're quick to anger. They're quick to frustrate. They're quick to be irritable, right? That tells us that there's an imbalance in that organ, right? Anger is a healthy emotion that we need to express ourselves. But when it's constantly coming up, there's that imbalance there. The other thing that's really wonderful is that each organ has a sound. And for the liver, there's technically two sounds, but it's going to be sighing and shouting. Have you ever been around someone who's constantly like, and you're around them and you're starting to get stressed and you're like, what is going on? Are you okay? Right? So that also goes to show us that there's a healthy side, right? We're overwhelmed, we're trying to get something done, we have a short period of time to be stressed, we're going to sigh. Felt good, released it. But when we're constantly sighing, we can look at that as a pathology, right? As disharmony. Something's going on. You're sighing a lot. Are you okay? And so these are all clues that that allow us to create a picture of health for someone. The other thing that's really cool about each of these organs is they open up into something in Chinese medicine. It's just a silly way of saying, where in the body can we see a microcosm of that organ? And so when it comes to the liver, it opens up into the eyes. So what does that mean? Have you ever been around someone who's had like red eyes, dry eyes, you know, just maybe something off with their eyes, right? That's a good sign of that's a sign of their liver health. And so if somebody's walking around with red eyes, you could imagine that they're frustrated. There's something going on. Why is it red? Liver should open up into the eyes and it should be clear and white and bright and glowing. That's a good sign of liver health. So these are all some cool ways that you can check in with somebody's health of an organ without asking too many questions, just by taking a look, by having a conversation, by looking into their eyes. Another thing that's really cool is the liver. In last year's video, I briefly showed a organ clock. And this in Chinese medicine is a clock, and I can pull that up here. I'm going to add a photo into the chat in a little bit. And what that clock is that much like how nature has its own cyclical rhythms, right? When the sun rises, some birds come out and start singing, sun's at its highest, there's another orchestra of events that happen. That same thing occurs for us. Our organs each have a circadian clock, a time of the day where they're most active, where it's their time to shine. And so what does this mean for the liver? The liver's time is 1 to 3 a.m. That's when the liver is doing its thing. Now, this doesn't mean that we want to wake up from 1 to 3 a.m. It's actually the opposite. Something we did not cover here is that the liver also think of the liver as the governor for our dreams. The liver is very important to get into a very grounded state at night in order to help us dream and plan and have goals. And so I bring this up because from 1 to 3 a.m., we should be in a deep dreamlike state. That's a good sign for our liver. But if you're waking up between these hours, between 1 to 3 a.m., there may be something going on in our liver, whether it's physical, right? It's sluggish. It's not moving that qi properly, or it's emotional. The emotions are stopping that qi from moving. So this is an interesting way to clue into our body and see, hey, what's going on here? And of course, the season is spring. So I'm sure we're all heading into spring now. This is a time for your liver. Your liver loves spring. Eat bitter greens, right? Do qigong outside. This is definitely release that anger and frustration, dance it out, move it out. This is definitely a time to help nourish your liver because it's its time and it loves this time. And so I put some cute little quotes down there, but your liver is like a tree and it grows and it spreads and it helps everything move. That's what its job is. It's to move that qi. But if the tree gets stuck or tangled, it's going to get real frustrated. And that same thing happens to us. That's that angry drunk. That's where that comes from. Did that make sense for everyone? Amazing. Did we have any questions after the first fun organ?
Sorry, do you want to give a little, just a little touch on how this might influence a woman's cycle and the liver in the cycle?
Yes, this is a great question, Marissa. Okay. And so what we spoke about is how the liver's main job is to make that qi flow, right? It's got to move, needs to spread that energy. The liver's also responsible for our menstrual cycle. And so when we have a lot of anger or frustration, or if we're constantly in a state of stress, what is that going to do to that qi? it's tangled. It doesn't want to move. It is stuck. And so that same thing will manifest in our cycle. That smooth flow of menstrual blood that is timely, cyclically supposed to leave our body is now feeling the effects of that stagnant chi, of that buildup of emotion, right? That overwork, that stress, that anger, all those emotions that we are holding on to in a non-balanced way is now going to stop that chi, and our blood flow that's supposed to come out so timely is going to say, actually, there's an obstruction, so I'm going to wait a few days before I come. Doesn't feel good right now, right? So these are just some ways in which the liver and those emotions can interfere with our period and our menstrual cycle, because we want that smooth flow. We want that cyclical. We just want the rain to come down when it needs to come down. We don't want little splurts and splashes every now and then, right? It's that sort of, I'm sorry if that was a graphic thought, everybody, but that's where we are. Okay. Amazing. We're now going to move on to, and I had fun with these, the shy bladder. So we spoke about how kidney, right? The element is water. And the emotion is fear. So I think the shy bladder is already starting to make sense and come together a little bit. So in Chinese medicine, fear and insecurity are the emotions that are tied to the kidneys, okay? The kidneys are also interesting. I'm not going to get too lost in this, but I'm just going to drop it for context. In Chinese medicine, and again, this is different than Western, the kidneys are kind of like your mitochondria. You're given your vital life force from your parents, and it's stored in your kidneys. So you can imagine this vital life force that gives you this vitality to be courageous and go after your dreams and to follow your life and to be strong, right? If you're constantly in a state of fear and insecurity, you're just going to drain that vitality and that vital force. So it's these emotions, fear and insecurity, that really, really, really hurt the kidneys. Have you ever noticed, I mean, this is maybe more for men than women, but women too, that you can't pee when you're nervous or stressed or shy or afraid? You're in the bathroom and there's multiple people around you. Maybe you're more shy that way, and all of a sudden your bladder stops working, right? It's those emotions. So if the kidney harbors the emotions of fear and insecurity, and you're about to pee, but you're so scared, right? It's going to drain the kidney of its energy so it can't perform its other functions. Because your kidneys are so busy being consumed by the fear and insecurity, its other functions that it's supposed to perform are going to go downhill, like urinating. And so the shy bladder thing is absolutely real in a way. What's also interesting about the kidneys is that they open up into the ears. Ringing ears. Have you ever, right? Have you ever been stressed and all of a sudden your ears go out, or you have a ringing in your ears? Or even like hearing loss? That's a telltale sign of the health of your kidneys. So there's definitely ways for you to look for the health of your kidneys aside from your bladder. You're going to see that also in your hair. Have you ever seen someone who's gone premature gray in their early 20s, right? They have like a whole hair of gray hair, but they're so young. That's the health of the kidneys. Kidneys are that vital energy, that vital force. They're your battery pack for your life, right? How much vitality you have to move through the world. And if we have a lot of grays, that tells us, oh, the kidneys have been under stress. The kidneys have been under stress or fear or insecurity for it to cause the hair to go gray, because that vitality is no longer there in the hair. That's a fun way to think about it. And so when it comes to the urinary bladder, we spoke about how the emotions are fear and insecurity. The noise, right? Every organ has its own sound. The sound of the kidneys are groaning. I actually don't even know how to do a groan, but it's like, row. No, that's a growl. Yeah. I'm sure we could answer something. I'm sure we could all. Yeah, there we go. Thank you, Charles. Thank you for that.
Happy to help.
Groan. Have you ever been around someone who's groaning and you're like, ooh, okay. right? These sounds give us clues into the health of the organs. The time where the kidneys feel the most alive or best is 5 to 7 p.m. Okay. So let's take a step back a bit. The job of the kidneys is to store energy. That's what it loves. It loves to store energy. That's what it's so good at, which is why its season is winter. What is winter? Everybody's storing energy. Bears are underground conserving their energy. Trees shed their leaves to conserve their energies. So too does the kidneys want you to conserve your energy. And so what I take from this when it says 5 to 7 p.m., this is a time where you should be resting. Or maybe you just finished dinner and you're relaxing and you have a tea and you're drinking liquid, right? This is a way to help nourish the kidney during that time. If from 5 to 7 p.m., you are active and running around, you're not storing energy. That might not be the best for what your kidney wants. These are just some things to think about. And of course, where it opens up, the kidneys open up into the ears and the hair. And so ringing in the ears, tinnitus, hearing problems. Have you noticed that maybe in the last few months, your hearing has changed drastically? That can give you a sign into the health of your kidneys. Even your hair, are you graying more than usual, right? Your vitality, the amount of vitality your kidneys have represents itself in our hair. If you're going gray much earlier, it's time to look at our kidneys and say, hey, how can I help nourish you so that you can store more energy and so that we're not, right? So these are just some very interesting ways to look at each organ and to pick up signs in people. Remember, your kidneys, they're earth, the element earth. So they're like a deep lake. They store your energy, they ground you. And fear weakens the kidneys, right? It can lead to anxiety, even shaky legs, right? Because you're no longer grounded. Your energy stores are shaky. So these are all signs of kidney imbalances. And I'm just going to add in, this is going to be really fun next week when we start being able to facial read based off of these things. Can you spot the liver person? Can you spot the kidney person? What are the telltale signs? Is it the premature graying? Is it something to do with the ears, right? Oh, amazing. Thank you for the clock, Marissa, in the chat. So these are just some fun things that we're going to play with for next week. All right. Okay, this is now we start to get into some fun ones too. The workaholic. When I was writing this out, I was like, this is my dad. This is my dad. 100% the workaholic, heart and joy. And so the heart in Chinese medicine governs joy and well-being, right? A good heart is going to be someone who presents with an optimistic outlook on life. They have very good general mental and emotional well-being. They're not too angry. They're not too happy, even keeled, responds well, right? That's a good quality heart. But the workaholic comes in when, do you ever know someone who's works tirelessly, never takes time for themselves, is constantly throwing themselves in work over their relationships? This person is engaging and, engaging the energy of a heart in a very unbalanced way. And that can lead over time to exhaustion and irritability and generally a lack of joy. Think of somebody who throw themselves into work as a way to distract themselves from the well-being, the emotional well-being that they're not giving themselves. That's a way that you can look at it. And so the heart, of course, we know is joy. And I'm just gonna, change slides here. Perfect. So summer, I don't think there's a person in this chat who's going to say summer is an unjoyful time. No, summer is the most joyful time. Sun's out, buns out, we're all feeling good. Everybody's right. Our energy is up. We want to do more things. We're feeling more joy in our lives, more laughter, more adventurous. That is the season for the heart, that joyful season. And of course, the sound of the heart is laughter. So I'm just going to throw out there, have you ever been around someone who laughs way too much? Like almost almost concerning, where you feel uncomfortable, where you're like, oh, wasn't that funny? Okay, we're really laughing now, right? But do you notice that it makes you feel a little bit uneasy? Like, this doesn't seem right, right? And I bring that up because it's the same for every organ. You can have an imbalance which shows through in how you express the sound, right? If I made a joke right now and we all had a little giggle, like hee 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 hee, normal. But if somebody in the group was like, we would all be a little freaked out, okay? We would all be a little concerned for this person. And what that is telling us is that there is this imbalance in that organ that's expressing itself as too much of this sound. That doesn't feel harmonic. That doesn't feel balanced. That doesn't feel healthy. And so that same thing goes for laughter. Too much laughter. Little imbalance in the heart right there. Can tell you that much. But also no laughter. Somebody doesn't really laugh, has a hard time finding things to laugh at. You can imagine too that that's also an imbalance of the heart where it's too weakened. And so these are all some really fun things to look at the next time that you're around someone, you're cracking jokes. Notice who laughs a little bit too long in that circle and send them love, because clearly there is a little bit of an imbalance in that heart organ. Something else that I love is that the heart opens up into the tongue. And why that is really interesting is because you can take that not literally, but in the context of, have you ever noticed people with an imbalanced heart might say really mean things, might talk cruel about others, or more judgmental? That's a sign of an imbalance in the heart. Your speech, the words you use, how you talk about the world, right? We know the emotion of the heart is joy. If somebody's constantly gossiping, talking ill about others, critical, you could imagine that there's an imbalance in the emotion of joy in their heart. And that same thing, if somebody, talks too much. You ever been around someone and you couldn't even get a word in? Maybe they don't even know your name and you just spoke for 35 minutes and they have no idea your name. That also is a sign and symbol of the emotion of the heart, right? You can think of that as two ways. They feel so good around you. The fire in their heart lit up and they just kept going. They just want to talk because they feel so good around you. But of course, there's that imbalance, right? Anytime you do something too much, right? Nature's all about harmony. It's all about harmony. And so these are some ways that you can really look in to the health of someone's heart, to the health of someone's, oh my God, please unmute and demonstrate laughter for us. I just saw that comment. That's great. Yes. But that's a way that you can check in on someone. And of course, the time. So the time, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. That's when your heart is in its element. That's when it wants to shine. Talk to people, call a friend, give a hug, make a joke, send an email, right? Engage in those emotions of the heart during that time to help nourish it. So a way, for example, to see, or a way for that time to showcase imbalances would be if during that time you felt particularly down, right? Lack of joy, lack of emotion, difficulty talking. I'm having a hard time expressing myself during 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. I find I can't express myself, right? The speech. These are all ways that we can clue in to see, what does my heart need right now? And so much like we were talking about, your heart is a warm, glowing fire, and it keeps you feeling happy and joyful and excited. But too much fire can make you overexcited and burn out of control. We don't want that. And too little fire, we're not warm anymore and we're cold. So that's part of the balances. Okay. The emotional eater. This is what Andrew brought up previously when we were talking about the spleen. We really mean digestion. And so the spleen governs the emotions of worry and overthinking, right? Here's actually a beautiful way that we can look at it. Because our spleen is in control of digestion, where we have to take food, digest it, and transform it into something that our body can use, the same way Our spleen is sensitive to the way we digest ideas and thoughts. If we cannot digest our ideas and our thoughts, and instead they stay stagnant in our mind where we're ruminating and overthinking, we're going to damage our spleen. We're not digesting. The spleen loves to digest. It loves to take things and think about it and then figure out a way to use it and transform it. That's what it loves to do. And so anytime that process is interrupted, we're going to see damages to the emotions of the spleen, right? Or the physical functions of the spleen. The spleen loves calm, stability, and if we're in a constant state of worry or constantly thinking, it becomes overworked and leads to digestive issues. You know, think of it like bloating, belching, gas. If our spleen isn't working the way it should, food is not getting digested. It's kind of just sitting in our stomach, stagnating, right? Maybe fermenting. We don't want that. We want it to move. And that same thing goes for our mind. If we're constantly ruminating, thinking about something, worrying, oh my God, I have this thing and I don't know what to do, and thinking, we're damaging our spleen. Our spleen wants to digest. And, you know, a way to look at it is, have you ever found yourself reaching for snacks when you're stressed or anxious, specifically sweet snacks? That's your spleen trying to comfort itself. That's the spleen saying, holy moly, I've been ruminating on this for 2 days. I'm exhausted. I can't perform my functions. Give me sugar. Give me something comforting that I can consume because I'm not doing good right now. And so we'll look into a little bit of the elements of the spleen. So we spoke about how worry, right? Worry and ruminating. Even if you're just thinking of the same thing over and over and over and over again, that is going to damage the spleen. We want to transform it. The emotion of the spleen is singing, which is a beautiful one, right? Have you ever caught yourself in a wonderful mood and you're singing? That's a positive sign of a healthy spleen, right? But I mean, I have to say I have not encountered this. So if anyone has, please raise your hand. Have you ever encountered someone who sings way too much? Like everything you say to them just turns into like a song. And then you're like, okay, Broadway theater, here we go. Okay. That would be a sign of imbalance in the spleen, or perhaps no singing at all. No singing at all. Nothing. No moments, right? We want our organs to express themselves in the way that best fits them. The times for your spleen is 9 to 11 a.m. And that, I'm not sure if anyone's connecting that piece, is very interesting because as we said, the spleen is digestion. In the morning, your digestion is the most fiery it can be. We want to support that. We want to support an active morning digestion. You should be digesting your largest meals in the beginning, at breakfast, start of the day. And so knowing that your spleen is most active from 9 to 11, this is a great time to eat nourishing meals. But remember, the spleen likes calm. Eat in a quiet place, away from your laptop, without thinking of things, right? We don't want to overwhelm the spleen. And so this is a great time to eat. This is also a great time to work and to digest ideas, to think of difficult things throughout the day. Start your day with your problem solving from 9 to 11. Your spleen is grateful for this job. It loves it. Of course, as long as we're not ruminating on it, but we're really moving through it. Your spleen opens up into your mouth. So because your spleen is a way that we can look at digestion, have you ever been around someone who perhaps has a lot of ulcers or cuts on their mouth, maybe extremely dry lips around their mouth? That's a telltale sign of their digestive abilities. We are seeing a microcosm of their spleen. And so that's also a way to look. Maybe it's dehydrated. Maybe it's really swollen. Like there's different clues that you can look at to gauge the health of the spleen when it opens up into the mouth. And of course, the job of our spleen is to digest and transform. So that's both ideas, that's our mental, our emotional. Are we digesting and transforming our emotions? Are we digesting and transforming our food? That's what the spleen loves to do. How can we support that better? And of course, you know, the spleen is like the earth. It's strong and steady. It really helps you digest foods and ideas. But if you think too much or you worry too much, you're going to make the earth really muddy and slow, like when it rains too much. And then think of what that's like walking through. It's like, oh, you're sludging through, right? I will say this is a side note, but that analogy of the mud and sludging through is what your stools can look like when the spleen is imbalanced. If we eat too much sugar or we are stressed and worrying too much, we can get sludgy stools. We can get damp stools, these muddy stools, because that's the job of the spleen to transform. And if it's muddy, it's going to create muddy stools. So that's also another way to look at the health of the spleen through our bowel movements. I could do a whole nother class on bowel movements, so I will refrain there. And then, of course, the chronic worrier, lung and grief. This one is always quite interesting. The lungs represent sadness and grief. Those are the emotions that the lungs hold on to. And when grief is unexpressed, if we have a long history of unexpressed grief, it can lead to physical symptoms like shallow breathing, tightness of the chest, anxiety, heart palpitations, respiratory problems, right? It can lead to these physical symptoms. You know, here's a great way to look at it. Have you ever noticed that when you're really sad and you're in a cry, you can't catch your breath? You're trying so hard, but you can't catch your breath. It's literally because the emotion of grief is contracting the lungs so much that it can't perform its other functions that it normally does, right? The lungs are so consumed by grief that the simple act of breathing, which is its function, is being ignored. And so it's another way that we can look at which emotions are tied to which organ, is what do we experience when we are, right, crying, shallow breathing, right? When we're very sad or upset, we're not breathing deep into our belly. We have much more shallow breaths. And so if we look deeper into the lungs, we know that the emotion is grief and sadness. We know that the sound is crying. Of course, sadness, that's the sound of the lungs. It's that crying. And we can look at it from a harmony perspective. If you have experienced something sad and you cry, that is a beautiful way to release that emotion. But if you are constantly crying, perhaps nothing sad happened to you. Perhaps crying, you find yourself crying at inappropriate times, or when you're not sure why. I can't stop crying. Oh my God, I can't stop crying. So many things are right. That can give us insight into the health, the emotional health of your lungs. You know, grief is really in some ways just unexpressed love. So you can also ask yourself questions of, in what ways in my life am I not expressing love? What sadness am I holding on to? Is it mine or is it not? In what ways can I move this sadness, right? The time of your lungs, right? We spoke about that. The time where the lungs feel the most is 3 to 5 a.m. We should be in a beautiful deep sleep, breathing deeply, allowing our lungs to do the work and maintenance that they need to do. If you are waking up between this time, 3 to 5 a.m., there may be an imbalance in the lung channels. So that's definitely something to look into, right? Is there something that I'm emotionally going through or spiritually going through that I'm having a harder time of letting go, right? The lung health, this grief, the sadness, it's not supposed to stay in us. In the same way we inhale and we exhale, we should be able to inhale and feel our grief and exhale and let it go. So if we're not, we can ask ourselves, what am I having a hard time letting go of? The season for the lungs is autumn, which I'm sure makes sense for all of us. Think of that fall season. Our lungs, it's time to shine. We want to support it with nourishing foods and herbs. And of course, if not, we're more likely to get sick. Our lungs are our immunity. That's why it's such a common time for us to get sick. The lungs also open up into the nose. So the nose can give us really good insight into the health of our lungs. Is it red? Is it swollen? Is it bumpy? Do you have constant congestion? When are you congested? This can all give us insights into the health of our lungs. And so my little quote here is, your lungs are like the wind, breathing in fresh air and letting go of the old. Letting go of the old is so important. But if you hold on to sadness for too long, then the wind gets really heavy and difficult to breathe. And so that is some food for thought. Yes. And now we've gone through most of the major organs, and I just wanted to give a little recap. I know we're hitting the end of the time and I don't want to go over too much, but really what's so wonderful about Chinese medicine is that it does show us how to live in tune with nature. There's times for movement, there's times for rest, there's times for growth, there's times for letting go. And like the seasons, our bodies are just these living landscapes. Your liver is spring's rising energy. The heart does burn like summer sun. The spleen grounds us. The lungs release the wind, and the kidneys hold on to the quiet wisdom in winter. So this is just a reminder that to stay balanced, eat your greens in spring, rest in the winter, breathe deeply in autumn, but most importantly, move, be free, let go, allow for change. We are dynamic ecosystem, just like nature, and it's important for us to reflect on that more than not. So that is my talk for today. And here are just some resources, some books. If you guys are ever more curious about Chinese medicine philosophy and organ theory, I do encourage you to go over it and write down bits of like, oh, like in what ways am I spleen? Like, do I sing? In what ways am I a heart? Do I laugh too much? I do encourage you, because next week when we go into facial recognition, it's going to be so much fun.
Thank you so much. That was incredible. So insightful. It's important to recognize these things, these emotions that come up, because it will give you an indicator as to how that organ is functioning. And like Ali said, it's not like a reductionistic view on the organ. It is overall, each one feeds into each other. It's very flowy. But the emotional state that you're able to self-reflect on, it might be able to indicate why you're having a physical symptom too. So for instance, even with that lung piece and the grief, like that could translate over time into a cough that just won't go away, right? And then even like the anger with your menstrual period, that could translate into cramps and clotting. So it can translate into physical symptoms too. So the emotions really give us this overarching like temperature gauge as to how these physical sensations and organs are operating in our body. So become aware of them. And if you have questions, or if you have associations that you're like, well, what would this mean, or whatever, please ask, because then we can all kind of learn together and dive into it.
Absolutely. That was such a good addition. Thank you, Marissa. Yes, they can absolutely lead to and manifest physical symptoms over time. And they can be subtle, things that you would never think. A cough, right? Hey, never been well since. Well, what was going on? So that's a great reminder too.
Yeah. Thank you. That was such a good overview. Does anybody have any quick questions before we end? Or insights? Any takeaways?
You guys are all wonderful. And take your time to digest it, right? Like the spleen, let's digest this information, let's transform it into something. And then next week, we can dive in a little bit more. Now that we have this as a base, we'll start looking at facial structures, being like, oh, that's a liver. Oh, that's a spleen. Oh, that's a lung. They have lung issues. And it's a really cool tool as you walk through life and you meet people, to be able to pattern recognition, and most importantly, be able to connect to people's emotions a little bit more and see where they are, to understand them more. So I'm so excited, and this was so much fun. So thank you all.
We can also throw in some tongue diagnosis, some of our clinical pearls there. That's another kind of ties into facial diagnosis, but Chinese medicine, they do kind of like the intake, asking about emotions and lifestyle habits and all that kind of stuff. And then they look at the physical symptoms, and it's just, tying all that together. That's kind of what Chinese medicine is. And that's, Ali was kind of mentioning that earlier. This is one aspect of it, but it's obviously a very broad system. So this is just one of like the key aspects that's kind of unique and you don't hear about as much in Western medicine. So yeah.
Absolutely. I'm so
I don't know
excited.
if you can see the comments, Ali, but you've got some praise coming in there. Everyone enjoyed it. So thank you so much for being here. We're so grateful for you. Yeah, brand new information for a lot of us. So this is fantastic. And it really is just the tip of the iceberg. And honestly, we'd love to have you back. I know you're back again next week, but Chinese medicine, it seems like your bread and butter. And it's just something that I think that we can all learn a lot from. So
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Marissa. Thank you, Nico and Tanya and Kat. You guys are so awesome. And Blaze, this was a lot of fun. And everyone, and Charles and everyone who came in, and Vero. And
Thank
yes,
you.
thank you guys. And I can't wait for next week. So stay clued in, digest, transform, and reach out if any questions. I can't wait to learn with you guys.
okay, awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah, no, it's awesome.
Thank
Mark your calendars
you.
next week, guys. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.